Well, thanks you all for coming. I'm just going to kind of introduce the program to you, and we'll get started. My name is Linda Favero, and I'm the director of the Alumni Career Services Program. We've been around just since last fall, 2008. So we're a program mostly focused on working with recent graduates and students, and then also working with alums in transition, so people that are kind of coming in and out of the workplace or making a big career change. I actually made a big career change just about 2 years ago myself after doing the same thing for 20 years. So we're always looking for those people wanting to make that transition. We've also opened this up to the community here, so there might be some people that aren't DECs. So we'll find out who our audience is in just a minute. I also want to introduce the other Career Center people that are here. You met Julie McKenzie, who's our program assistant when you came in. She is a DEC. Actually, she has 2 degrees from the U of O. And then Deb Sherritt came up from Eugene. She's the director of the Career Center, and she came up from Eugene to join us. Some of you may have met with her while you were a student down in Eugene. And then Stephanie Jennis will be graduating this spring. Yay! She is our communication and social media intern with a degree in journalism. So a lot of DECs helping out DECs, and that's kind of the theme of our program, our DECs helping out DECs here. As I mentioned, we launched in the fall 2008, and we take kind of a multidisciplinary approach to what we do here. We realize that everyone learns in a different way, so we offer one-on-one career counseling, and there's some brochures out there for you. We do skills workshops, so if you really want to focus on your resume or your interviewing skills, we have a variety of those different workshops. We also host a job search group once a quarter where we bring 8 people together over 3 weeks, and we meet twice a week. So if that's something that interests you, that's usually held over the lunch hour, and there's a few job search folks that are here who've been through the program. So if you want to talk to some people about what that's like, you raise your hands, you job search people, group people. See? There you go. And then we do events like this, which is a networking event. So we bring in alums that want to give back their time and share their stories about their career paths. Hopefully you find that inspiring as well, and you can connect with other DECs and other people in the community. So that's kind of who Alumni Career Services are. I wanted to also thank our partners that helped make this possible. The UO Alumni Association helped with all the marketing for this event. Academic Affairs helped support this event. And then our library. We actually have a library over here. So if any of you new to the White Stag building, hands? So this library is available to you as well. So, and there's a lot of periodicals. It started out as kind of an architecture focus, but if you want to come and utilize that facility, that is open to you as well. So feel free to utilize that if you're interested. So the format for this evening is I have a number of questions that I've prepared to ask our panelists, and they will share their wisdom on those after I introduce them. And then we'll open it up to the floor, and we'll have a roving mic so that if you have some burning questions, you can ask them as well. After that, we will have a raffle. Each one of these people have been so generous as to give their time, so they are willing to take you to lunch for an informational interview. So we will do that at the end, so you want to be present for that as well. And we do have evaluation forms. As I mentioned, we're a new program. We are trying to design this around our alums' needs, so please take the time to fill out some feedback on that so that we can continue to improve what we're doing here. And then we invite you to stay for the reception. So we have Elephants has provided some nice food, so we encourage you to visit with people and to enjoy the food. So that's the program for today. So let me go ahead and start introducing first, so that our speakers kind of know what to expect, let's just get a sense of the audience. How many of you here are students? Raise your hand. Okay, couple. How many of you are, how many of you are graduates from 2010 to 2005? Okay, and how many of you are more experienced than that or community members? Okay, great. Well, that's a nice balance. Okay, so pretty much, not so many students, but mostly alums, that recent grads split, and then alumni that are a little bit more senior. That's great. So now you guys know who you're talking to.
How many of you are my old roommate and Linda's husband?
He just snuck in the door. Okay, that was going to be one of the stories I was going to tell on you, but you've already shared it. Okay, I first wanted to introduce, and we have the names up on the board, so if you're thinking about the questions and you want to direct it to a particular person, Carmen Caballero Rubio, she is a 98 political science grad. One thing I wanted to indicate to all of you as well is that we have 3 different disciplines represented here today. We have 3 very different careers. We have 3 different decades. And we have 2 people that serve on the University of Oregon Alumni Association, and one person who has also already spoken on a Eugene panel. So these are definitely people that are committed to the U of O and wanting to give back to the U of O. So we do thank you for your time. So Carmen, she is currently the executive director of the Latino Network, and I'm sure she'll talk about that experience. She just started there in September. Before there, she's been really involved with City Hall and Multnomah County, so she's had an interesting path to share. And from reading that article, they were quite disappointed to see you go. And some of you may have seen, she actually just had an article in the Oregonian. We did post that on our fan page at the Facebook. So read about that. She's the first generation to go to college, so she's got a great story to tell. And Sandra Mcdonough is sitting next to her. She graduated in '76 in German and journalism. She is currently the president and CEO of Portland Business Alliance. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Portland Business Alliance. It's a business trade association where they have 1,400 members representing more than 325,000 business people. So if you have a question about a business, she might be a good person to talk to. Before that, she was actually in senior management roles in the energy industry, working for 20 years with Pacific Corp and PG&E. So if anyone interested in the energy industry, she'd be a good person to talk to about that as well. And prior to that, she worked at the Oregonian and the Seattle Times as a reporter. So it'll be interesting to hear about your path because it's taken many different turns. And then this gentleman, our token male, which we're so appreciative to have, Scott Reames. Yes, he is my husband's former roommate when they were in college. Isn't that a small world? He is currently the historian for Nike. Writing all about that history, about how that came to be, which has a long legacy associated with the U of O as well. He's had a variety of positions actually at Nike, and started in 1992 as the first events and communications coordinator for Nike Town stores. So he's been there for quite some time. But he did actually start out in agency work. A lot of journalism folks do start out in agency work, working for Fleischman Hillard, who I believe one of the founders is from U of O. Or one of the lead guys right now, and he was doing the...
Yes, one of the lead guys now, not the founder, though.
Not the founder, yeah.
Or founders.
Founders, okay. So those are our 3 panelists. That's a very brief introduction. You're going to get to hear a lot more about their careers as we go through the questions. So, Carmen, I'm going to start off with you with the first question. So, since we do have a number of recent grads here, what direction did you expect your career to take when you were in college?
When I was in college, I was really involved in campus and very involved and active in the student unions and student government. However, I always just sort of thought I would end up in social work or with my MSW working somewhere in the community. It sort of is taking me back down that road, but it's certainly not where I started out. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what I envisioned, but mostly I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Really the truth.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Latino Network?
Yeah, the Latino Network is a 12-year-old nonprofit, and what we do is work to close the achievement gap among Latino students. A lot of you have probably read today that the Latino student incompletion rate in high school is pretty dismal, at 32% in Portland Public Schools. And so because this community is growing, we feel it's really important to make sure that these young people get a really good education, get the tools they need to go into college and contribute to the economy. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what we do. We do a little bit of education, and we also do community leadership development for the community here in Portland.
Right. Sandra, how about you? What did you think was going to happen when you were in college?
Well, I decided what I wanted to be when I was in 6th grade.
Oh,
so
that's good.
I decided then I wanted to, I saw my sister's high school newspaper, so I decided I wanted to be a reporter for the Cleveland High School Tomahawk here in Portland, and then go to college and get a journalism degree and be a reporter. And same time, when I was in 6th grade, I also was drafted into taking German. Portland Public Schools at the time was introducing languages in the grade schools, and my school, Woodstock, was getting German, and I didn't have any interest in learning German, but they just put me in the class. And so I ended up starting taking German when I was in 6th grade, and I took it all the way through college, including doing a junior year abroad. And so that's why I have the German degree. I had enough credits for both. And so I really wanted to be a reporter, but I don't know that I was really sure how to go about becoming a reporter. And I was also in college painfully shy. I mean, I worked as a sophomore on the Oregon Daily Emerald staff for the entire year I probably did stories, 2 or 3 times a week, and I don't think I ever actually went into the newsroom. They would call me up, I'd do the story, and I'd drop it off in a box outside the newsroom in the EMU. So, but that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah. So junior year, were you still working for the Emerald, and then did you start to?
I worked for the Emerald as a freshman, not as a freshman, as a sophomore as a reporter. Then junior year, I went to Germany for the year, and I came back. I was very poor, like many students, and I went to work on the copy desk at the Emerald because it paid more than the reporters. But then the Emerald ran out of money that year, and they decided they wouldn't pay copy editors. So I worked on organizing a strike of the until the editors at the time said, you don't have a contract, you can't strike. So whatever. But I was very lucky, and then as I got to the end of my senior year, I'd had a summer job every year since I was, a junior in high school, so I did what I'd done every summer. At the end of every year, I applied for a summer job, which was being an intern at the Oregonian, and I was extremely lucky that I got that job and stayed for 7 years.
So when were you at the Seattle Times then?
I was at the Oregonian for 7 years and covered a variety of things. I covered politics, and I covered energy, which actually led to having a long career in energy, and left the Oregonian after 7 years and went to work at the Seattle Times for 2 years after that. If you're familiar with newspapers, Seattle Times and the PI did a joint operating agreement, which now we can look back and say was a really stupid business move for them because neither paper ended up healthy as a result, but they had a few job openings, reporter openings as a result of the joint operating agreement. And I was one of the reporters hired there. I covered business at the Seattle Times.
So you actually did what you thought you were going to do when you were in college.
I did for 10 years. I loved it, and then I was ready to do something else.
Yeah, great. Scott, what did you think you were going to do when you were in college?
Well, it's funny because when I was in 6th grade, I knew what I wanted to do too. I wanted to be second baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals, but that didn't work out, so I wasn't. So since I couldn't hit a curveball, I did something else. You and I talked about this. My history at Oregon was rather unusual because I went into it at the University of Fall of '79 as a math and science devotee, wanting to get a degree, maybe teaching math or going into the sciences. And I graduated from Oregon in 1989 with a degree in journalism. So I had a very unusual route during those 10 years. And I like to point out, my wife always skips the part I was not in school the entire 10 years. I actually took some time off. So I wasn't one of the 10-year plan. But no, I started off with much more of a traditional engineering science background, and I just about a year or two into it, I just realized it was more of what I thought other people wanted me to do, and because I was always good at math. The people said, "Oh, you should do math. You should do this. You should teach math." And it wasn't until the end of my sophomore year, that I realized I didn't actually enjoy math that much. I was just good at it. So I took time off for about 4 or 5 years and worked in Eugene, traveled around the world and around the country, and started to work for the YMCA a lot more. I was doing some part-time work as a camp counselor during the summertime, and during the summer I got to know some of the people there, and they said, you're actually pretty funny. Would you mind writing our newsletter? Because our newsletter was really, really dry. Get cookies at 2 o'clock for
And
Sarah's
not dry
birthday.
funny. I like dry funny.
No, it wasn't dry yet, witty. It was just dry. So I said, well, let me write it. So I started writing the newsletter, and then the Child Care Center came to me and said, look, would you please write our newsletter? And the Tennis Center said, oh, would you write our newsletter? And then the director of the Y said, look, I know we're a nonprofit, but we can't just have you do all this for free. So they paid me to start writing, and I loved it. And then I started doing some public relations, and they offered me a half-time job and then a full-time job. And so I was doing that for about 3 years when I finally decided it was time to go back to school, aided by the aforementioned wife who I had just married, who basically said, you're 26 years old, you don't have your degree yet. So she she urged me into getting my degree, which I finally did in '89 in journalism. So it was a very unorthodox route. So it's definitely true. I did not have anything close to what I finished with was what I was intending when I started.
Carmen, both Sandra and Scott talked about how they got their first jobs a little bit more. Can you say a little bit more about how you got your first job?
My first job, I sort of count 2 jobs as my first job. Right at the end of college, during the summertime, I was volunteering at a youth leadership camp. and I ran into the director of Miracle Theater, which is a Latino nonprofit theater here in town. And as a teenager, I had worked with this theater group, and I had been part of its programming. And he said, "Hey, we have an opening. Would you think of applying for your first job here?" And I said, "Sure." So I did, and I was hired, and I loved the job. It exposed me to a lot of different things I never would have otherwise known about, like box office and cleaning the bathrooms after shows and things like that. It did expose me to a different side of nonprofits, and there are different kinds of nonprofits. And I met wonderful people, but it was really hard to do that job and live on my own. So I had to take a job as a waitress on the side to keep this job, which I loved, as the marketing associate, which was a really fancy name for everything. And so right after that, not even 6 months later, I was at an event that the consul of Mexico had to celebrate the new consul that came in, and I ran into a woman that we started chatting up there at where the food was, and she worked at Metropolitan Group, this small, then it was a smaller communications agency that used to be in this very building on like the second or third floor. And she said, "Hey, we have an opening as a receptionist. Would you be interested coming by and for an interview? We're there next week. You know, if you submit your resume right now, we can fit you in, squeeze you in for an interview." And she said, "You know, it's an entry-level position, but if you're really good, the owner's a really great guy, and if you have the talents and have what it takes, he'll promote you." I said, "Sure, it sounds like a great opportunity." So I did, and Eric Fishman offered me a job on the spot. And so I feel like that was a really critical opportunity that I luckily that I jumped on. So that's sort of what led me into a different world that I thought I was going into. But so I really count Miracle Theater and Metropolitan Group as opening the door for me.
That's good. Well, and I think that's good to hear too, because I think sometimes people don't always want to start as a receptionist. They think when they have a degree, but if you find the right organization, it can be that perfect stepping stone to more opportunities if you find that fit. And a little side note, Eric Fishman and I went to grade school together and high school together. And again, you just keeping in contact with people that you might know, you just never know where those contacts might. He was saying, "Oh, say hi to Carmen for me today." So people like to support people, so stay connected to people as you can. Did you two want to add anything to what you talked about in terms of those first jobs that you got?
Well, you know, I don't think I mentioned this, that when I finished my internship at the Oregonian, this was the summer of 1976, we had about 7 or 8 interns that year because the paper was transitioning to its first computer-based system, and they were actually introducing it on the copy desk. And so they had a lot of reporters working through the copy desk, and so there were more than usual. And the city editor at the end of the summer collected us all together, and he said, "You are the best crop of interns we've ever had, and when you're ready to get a job, let me know and I'll help you out." So I raised my hand and I said, his name was Hildy. I said, "Hildy, I need a job." And he said, "Well, I didn't know you were graduated." And I said, I am, and I kind of need a job so I can live. And so he came to me a few days later, and he said, "Okay, I have 2 options for you. One is a full-time permanent job at the Tri-City Herald in Richland, Washington, and I'm pretty sure I can get you that job, permanent full-time job, or you can stay at the Oregonian for 3 more months as a temporary." And thank goodness I had some good sense, and I took the risk of staying as a temporary for 3 more months and ended up getting a full-time job. So, you know, that
was it because you were just working really hard during those 3 months, or what made them decide that after that 3 months that you would get that full-time job?
You know, I think they were trying me out. They were throwing a lot of things at me. It's really unusual for somebody to be hired at a newspaper fresh out of college like that, and so they, and honestly, I came cheap. So, you know, they, I don't know. I never asked why. All I did was when they told me to go downstairs and sign the paperwork for insurance, I just went and did it and said thanks. But taking that risk and saying, okay, I'm going to see if I can roll through for 3 more months and land something was worth it.
Good for you. Scott, anything more to how you got that landed that first job?
Well, I mean, the first job was actually before I graduated, so it
Yeah.
wasn't, I don't know if it's cart and horse here, but I mean, that was just one of those unusual circumstances where, you know, again, you work for a nonprofit, like you were saying, you get employed to do everything. So it's a great experience. It's terrible money.
Yeah.
But you do pick up a lot of skills, which is actually what led me to the agency work. Same thing. Money's a little better, not that great when you enter, but you are doing a lot of things because you're assigned a lot of different accounts, which you can be depending on the agency. So the first year I was there, I was doing everything from writing a cable newsletter to, what was I doing? The Science Center in St. Louis had a dinosaur exhibit. I did the press for that. I was doing Valvoline instant oil change openings in Kentucky. That was very exciting. And I ended up doing PR for motorsports, which is how I ended up back at Nike in the long run, which is kind of strange, which we can get to later. But if you've ever been interested in Nike or in the NHRA Top Fuel drag racing, the big cars with the little cars with the long big wheels, and I'm not, but I did PR for that for about a year and a half because that's where they told me to go.
How did you get that job, the Fleischman job?
Well, I was.
Did you want to move back there, or is that where you're from?
I'm from St. Louis.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, my wife and I were both. She was working part-time, helping me go through school because I quit full-time to go back to work. I wanted to go to school. I just wanted to get the degree over with. I just blazed through 4 straight trimesters, like 22 hours a trimester, just like go, yeah, done, get out, because I wanted to get my degree. And we decided that since she was working part-time, we would both look in Portland, Eugene, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, and then since I was from St. Louis, we just, why not? I still had my family there, so I ended up getting a job at Fleischman Hillard, which I think now is the world's largest agency. At the time, it was growing, but it wasn't too well known. And I did some research. I found out, luckily for me, that the CEO of Fleischman Hillard, a man named John Graham, in his college and high school years had worked for the YMCA in St. Louis. So I thought, well, that's worth it. It was worth a try. So I sent him a letter. In addition to going through the normal routes, I sent him a letter introducing myself, saying that I was moving to St. Louis, and I was a YMCA alum as well, and just was hoping to at least get a chance. You know, I didn't expect him to actually say, you know, you're hired, but I wanted to at least be able to get him to maybe tell the guy in hiring, or I think I can't remember his name, but that he should at least look at my resume. And I'm hoping that's what he did. He told me later that he would not have told them they had to hire me, but I think he at least cracked the door a little bit. So that was the little thing I learned, was never shy away from any advantage you can possibly come up with to get your foot in the door.
Good.
But then I obviously got the job, I hope, on my own merits, not just because of the YMCA connection.
Right, good. So coming back to you, Scott, what were some key decisions that you made along the way to get to where you are today? Well,
the irony for me was that when I graduated from Oregon, I really wanted to work for Nike, right? And so I'm PR for Nike. That was like, well, that's perfect. I had a journalistic degree. I love sports, and here in the Northwest. Both my father and my grandfather worked in the shoe business, both at the Brown Shoe Company in St. Louis and then for a small sporting goods company in Eugene. So I knew the business, and I thought, well, Nike's the perfect fit for me. Nike didn't feel the same way. I got that letter basically, thank you for your interest, and good luck, go away. So I then got the job in St. Louis at Fleischman Hillard, was assigned motorsports for Valvoline, didn't get Al Unser Jr. in the IndyCar race, didn't get Mark Martin in NASCAR, I got Top Fuel, which at the time I was thinking, this is terrible, but I started traveling around the country and I got to know the other race directors from different sports. And wonder of wonders, there's the event manager for the Portland race, the Portland IndyCar race, it used to be called the Budweiser G.I. Joe's 200, I think now it's defunct, but I met her and she said, we're thinking about hiring a full-time PR director. Would you ever want to leave St. Louis? And so I talked to my wife, and she never really caught into St. Louis very much. She's a native Eugenian, so that was a tough situation for her. So we talked about it, and I applied for the job and got the job as the event manager in Portland for this motorsports company. So again, I'm in motorsports, but at least I'm in Portland, and I'm starting to make some connections. Well, I get to know some folks through the G.I. Joes, like the Norm Daniels, who's the president of G.I. Joes. So you get to make a few connections there. And because I had event background and a PR background, when Nike Retail was looking to hire they just opened up Nike Town Chicago, so we had 2 stores at the time, and they were doing just a blowout number of athlete appearances and all sorts of events in the stores, and they needed somebody to essentially manage them. But they were trying to find somebody who had public relations experience and who had event management experience. And they found plenty of this and plenty of that, but nobody with both. So it was just one of those lucky coincidences that I came in with, able to demonstrate that I had both experiences, and that got me the job.
Great.
And then years later, I moved in and got into the public relations job at Nike. So, sometimes you don't always get to where you want to go by a straight line. But if you know what you're willing to do and you keep your eye on it, then you can kind of put your chess pieces in place where you finally do make that move.
Mm-hmm. Set yourself up well.
I think so. And to your point earlier about contacts and figuring out who you know and people who know you know. I mean, this is obviously long before LinkedIn and Facebook and all these other social networking things made it a lot easier to stay connected and learn of people that you know that know other people. You just had to be much more diligent with your Rolodex and with your ears and say, oh, you know so-and-so at Nike, do you? Really? And then following up on it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Carmen, how about you? Were there some key decisions early in your career that you made that landed you where you are today?
I think definitely taking opportunity, even though, like you mentioned earlier, it might not be the ideal title or job. If it puts you in a position to get your foot in the door, or in a position where you get to learn from some really amazing, talented people, then it's worth it. So I think at a very young, or I should say early in my career, I just sort of had that ear open all the time for those kinds of opportunities. We also grew up with not a lot of money, and I was the first in my family to go to college. So I had been told by my parents, take opportunities when you have them. If there's an opportunity to meet someone that you can learn from, then do it. And so I've really sort of modeled my life and my career on that. If there's an opportunity for me to learn from somebody who knows a lot more about something or has a skill that I'm particularly weak in particular, I like to do that. So those things. And the other one is also to follow up on what Scott said is about your network. Maintain your network, because you never know where a lot of people that may be your peers or your colleagues may end up, and you may be in a position to help them down the road, or they may be in a position to give you a great referral down the road. So I think those two things are something that I've kept with me along my career and have helped me personally.
Is there something specific, a decision that you made specifically that you think really brought you to where you are today at the Latino Network? Is there something that you can point to?
I believe that it was volunteering as well. I always had a strong interest in politics from a very young age, from high school. And so throughout my time at U of O, I was very active in student government. I learned how to run a campaign on campus. So there were certain things that gave me some exposure it's kind of like a little microcosm of what actually happens in a city or a bigger town. And so through that experience, I met a lot of people and students who are drawn to the same kind of things. And then when real campaigns happened and candidates came through town at U of O to speak, we had opportunities to volunteer on their campaigns or opportunities to volunteer setting up the events. And we met staffers for other elected officials. And so when it came time to graduate, it was very easy for us to reconnect with these people and let them know that we were looking for jobs, or they would contact us when there was another campaign. The 4 years rolled around again, and it was time to mobilize their base. And then I found that a lot of the people that I worked with in college around this kind of like politics and government stuff, we keep running into each other every while, during campaign season. And that is something that I have lifelong friends now from U of O who are very active in government, but not just government, in education, in business, and we all see each other very regularly because we have that strong connection from the time when we were students and we were volunteering and getting involved.
And continuing to cultivate those great. How about you, Sandra? Were there some big decisions you made to get you at the Portland Business Alliance?
Well, remember, I'm the one who goes back the furthest here.
So there's a few decisions. You're right. That's fair.
But I was sitting here thinking about this, and I'm going to go to the best career advice I ever got. And it was when I was a very, very young reporter for the Oregonian, and we had a reporter based in Washington, D.C., and that was what I really at that point wanted to do in my life. And he was the greatest guy. He was a phenomenal reporter. He came out to Portland every summer, and a couple times during the year. Really a phenomenal reporter, and he was also very good looking, so I really enjoyed talking to him. And he decided, after I'd been there a few years, he was a few years older than me, that he was going to leave the Oregonian. He came out to Oregon, and I was working in Salem, then I was covering the State House for the paper at the ripe old age of 24. I can't believe
Wow.
they did that. But
You were probably really good.
I was 24. So he came down to take me to lunch and tell me that he was leaving the Oregonian. I said, well, geez, how could you do that? This is such a great place. You know, it was my dream job at that point. And he said to me, Sandy, you know it's time to leave a job when you maybe have learned what you're going to learn there and you want to go someplace and learn something else. Now, the punchline of the story is the guy's name was Bill Keller, and he is now editor of the New York Times. So he has followed that philosophy. He's also very good-looking still. So we had him come out for an event. It was wonderful. But so I have used
Did you go to
that-
dinner beforehand?
I wish. I have used that many times in my career because I've made several job changes. I'm kind of typical now, maybe not so typical of my generation, but what we see now is I worked at the Oregonian, I worked at the Seattle Times, I went to Pacific Power, then I went to a subsidiary of PG&E, which is a San Francisco-based corporation, always based here. I've lived in D.C. for a while, and now I'm at the Portland Business Alliance, and there have been lots of transitions. And so for me, the thought process when I was getting ready to make a change, or, you know, honestly, the jobs usually found me more than me finding the jobs, was where am I going to go? More importantly than what company am I going to work for, it was what person am I going to work for? Mm-hmm. Who's going to be a mentor? And I have had unbelievable mentors. When I went to work, when I left the Seattle Times, and I knew I was bored being a reporter, they wanted me to be an editor, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. I was at the Oregonian, then I went to the Seattle Times, and they wanted me to go to D.C. for them. And when I thought twice about that, I thought, you better be thinking about your job, whether you're in the right job. And so I went out around, actually around the country. I used my network, and when you're a reporter, you can develop a really good network. And I talked to ex-reporters who had jobs that I thought were really interesting. And so met a woman in New York, met people all over the place, and then I called a guy I knew here in Portland who was a vice president at Pacific Power, a guy named Bill Robertson, who I'd met before through political things like Carmen, more as a reporter, and in other fields I've done a lot of political work, so it's a really strong network. And he had worked for a congressman whose race I covered. So I went to see him, and he talked to me about coming to work for him before. So I said, you know, I'm looking at doing something different. You used to be a reporter. You have a great job. What do you think I should do? And he said, I think you should come work for me. Oh. And I took the job, and honestly, I didn't even know what the specific job was going to be. I went back to the Seattle Times, and they said, what are you going to do? And I went, I don't know, but I'm going to work for this really smart man who is probably my most important mentor. But every single job I've gone to is, what am I going to do that I haven't done before? What's the opportunity for growth? And who am I going to be working with every day? And am I going to learn from them? And that's still, you know, I'm 55 years old, and I'm still looking for those opportunities today.
That's great. Those are good. How about you, Scott?
What was the question again?
You started with him.
That's right.
Oh, I guess
I get a rebuttal.
Okay. All right. I won't make you go again.
The only thing I would add when you said about the best advice you're ever given is I had a similar person who told me basically that it was early in my Nike career, and Nike's a tough company to get into, comfortable, and figure out your way, because you're around with so many people who you feel like are just so much more knowledgeable about things than you are, so you feel pretty like, oh my God, I'm the only one that doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. So about 8 or 9 months in, I was thinking maybe it wasn't right for me because I was really struggling, and I got a call from some headhunter from, I think it was Amana. It was somebody back in the Midwest, and I was like, well, they're offering me like 25% more than I was making at Nike, and I'm from the Midwest. I'm thinking, well, and so I talked to a friend of mine. I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, are you passionate about washing machines? I said, not especially. He goes, are you passionate about sports and what you do at Nike? I said, oh yeah, absolutely. He goes, isn't that your answer? I'm like, you're right. You have to be passionate about it. I mean, I did try to sell, Top Fuel drag racing for a year, but I hated it. I mean, I didn't look forward to it at all. There's probably some people that actually would totally embraced that, like the rubber and the loud noise and the smoke and the guy taking off, and that wasn't me. So, but I was passionate about Nike, even though at that particular moment, I was feeling like I'm not sure this is what I believed in the brand and the company. I just wrote my own little corner of it at the time wasn't really working for me. But when he said, "Are you passionate about washing machines?" I was like, "Oh my God, you're right. I'll be PRing washing machines and dryers and stoves." And, I'm sure there are people that can do that really well.
When my washing machine breaks, I get passionate about it, though.
So anyway, that was the best advice I ever had, was just follow what you're passionate about. You can't always do that. I mean, it's not like every job just falls open that you really want to have. But if you are lucky enough to get in a position that you really do embrace, like when I was the PR director for the Y, I wasn't even really a director. I mean, I just espoused the YMCA. I believed in it. I didn't have to have message points. I didn't have to rehearse. I didn't have to wonder what I was going to talk about. I just started talking about my passion for the Y and how great it was for the city of Eugene and all the things it did. And it was just tripped off the tongue and went right out, So that made things a lot easier. Same with when I was in PR for Nike. I didn't have to sit there and think about what I needed to justify. I was just talking from my heart, and that made it so much easier than have to keep going back to your little notes, say, "Oh yes, and we're the third leading microwave manufacturer," and
Yeah. It was a part of you. Let's talk a little bit. We're talking a lot about positive things. Have there been obstacles either that you're currently dealing with or in the past that you'd like to share with the group and how you overcame them?
Yes. So I've worked for 3 elected officials and then on 3 different campaigns. And so one of the biggest stresses about working for an elected is that you're always hyper aware of what you're doing or what you're saying, and that can be really exhausting. So even when you're not working, you're working, sort of, because you're representing somebody else and you're entirely responsible in some way for someone else's reputation, public reputation. And so after a few years, you sort of get accustomed to sort of being a very private person, or the way that I dealt with that was to just develop a really strong core of friendships and supports that you can talk to, like, always off the record. Because really quickly in the political world, you'll find that all of a sudden you can have a lot of friends, that are, friends, professional friends that, there's some benefit to a relationship, which is part of the field. But that was always a level of stress for me that I was always aware of. And so that's sort of how I dealt with it. I had a really good, tight circle of friends, and I had my family who most of the time had no idea or clue what my work life was at all. And then today, now that I've transferred into a nonprofit world, it's completely different. Actually, some things are still political in this world, or those kinds of tones involved, but I now have a board of directors that I have to work with, which is a very different kind of dynamic for me. But it's challenging, and I like that I'm learning something. And I felt like I learned enough working in the political world, and that it was time to do something else. So how I deal with that now is I'm still dealing with it. I haven't found a solution yet for finding the balance. I'm still learning. So I'll tell you when I find out.
Yeah. Any obstacles for you along the way?
I graduated from college in 1976, and it was really a different world, and it was really a different world for women. And even when I got to the Oregonian, there weren't very many women of, say, my mother's generation who had been reporters, or there weren't that many women in the newsroom, and certainly weren't that many women in leadership. In fact, I think I can remember one assistant city editor, and then the women's department, the women's page, which, by the way, they assigned me to. My counselor and advisor in college, Ken Mitzler, said, "Do not let them put you on the women's page." And I practically cried when they transferred me there. But I actually wrote some award-winning pieces while I was there, so it wasn't that bad. And then they transferred me back out. But being, I went from the newsroom, where it was an early time for women in serious journalism roles, to the utility industry, which wasn't famous for women, and 20 years in the energy industry. And so I have, in my career, I've been the first woman, including in my current job, to do a lot of jobs that I've done. I've been the only woman in the room in a lot of jobs, and let me tell you, when you're in a room with a bunch of utility male engineers and you're trying to, imagine that in Utah, because for a while I was doing Utah stuff, it was always challenging, and honestly, I've faced pay equity issues more than once in my career, and so sometimes you get a little tired of being the trailblazer on some of this stuff, and in fact, you get to a point, especially where I'm in my career, and you go, is it ever going to be over? But I don't think you ever stop, and what I am now really, really conscious of is looking at who's behind me and making sure that we continue to open doors for people who still need to have their doors open for them, make opportunity, and because we've all had to move through things, and it's the world's changed a lot in the 34 years since I graduated from the University of Oregon, and it's gotten better, but there's still a whole lot of challenges that we need to keep thinking about.
Thank you. Yeah. Any obstacles?
I can't think of like a specific obstacle. I mean, other than my first few years where I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was basically my own biggest obstacle, I guess. But once I decided I didn't need to please my parents and my friends and everybody else and do what I really wanted to do, then everything was much more clear to me that and the writing just sort of came, and I didn't realize I was a good writer at all until I would get feedback from people. I'd write, back in the 70s and 80s, we wrote letters to people instead of 140 character little blurbs. So I would get people coming back. I'd go back to visit Chris, and they'd say, "God, we just love your letters." It also helped that I was really miserable when I was in high school, and I didn't want to be in Eugene. Sorry, Oregonians, but I want to be back in St. Louis. So I was writing these terribly long letters, like, "Oh, I hate it here," and people would say the letters.
I have allergies.
No, I didn't have allergies, thank God. But they didn't have baseball here either. So I had all this feedback from people saying, you really write some emotional letters. You really can turn a phrase well. You ever thought about writing? I'm like, no, that's just to vent. And that just sort of sat in the back of my mind. So the obstacles, I think, were ones I created for myself. I wouldn't think that was good enough to write, so I didn't pursue it because I sort of talked myself out of it, thinking, it's not really. I should be a math guy. I should be a science teacher. And it wasn't really until I had a year at University of Massachusetts. I went on exchange there just before I dropped out of Oregon, when I realized I didn't want to be a teacher. And that's when I realized I could actually be anything I wanted to be, because those kids had no idea who I was. They had no preconceived notion that I was a math student, a journalism student, a stoner, religious guy, whatever. They'd never met me before, so I could essentially be myself for the first time. And then when I came back, that's when I dropped out of Oregon and started work, because I realized, okay, I'm just spending my money throwing my tuition money down the hole, because this isn't really what I want to do. So again, I know it's sort of more of a metaphysical obstacle, but that's really the biggest one I think I ever faced.
That you faced yourself, yeah. Well, I have 4 questions left, but I know people are going to want to ask other questions. So I'm going to ask one final question, and then I'll turn it over to all of you. And if you don't have any, I've got plenty more. So Sandra, starting with you, as you think about these people either embarking on a new career or transitioning to something different here in our audience, what are your thoughts or hopes for them as they pursue their passion and their interests?
Well, I think we've all said it. You want to make sure you wake up every day and want to go to work. Okay, not every day. I mean, I frankly would have liked to have stayed home today. But you need to
You're glad you're here.
You need to be interested in what you're doing every day. And you also need to look for unexpected. I mean, I now essentially run a small business. I'm German and journalism degree, and I'm pretty good at the finances. I've got a controller, but we're a $12 million operation. I have taught myself by working in a number of corporate jobs and some fairly senior roles how to do budgeting, how to read spreadsheets. I learned about, when I was in communications jobs, different kinds of stock offerings, and I've done politics. And you learn to do a lot on the job. So I think you should find a place where you can grow personally as well as professionally, and be willing to kind of step up and volunteer for things that maybe are a little bit outside of your comfort area. I remember I was when I was with PGT, which was a subsidiary of PG Andy based here, and my boss at the time, I was the director of communications for this small operating unit, and he stopped by and he said, you know, I've been thinking that maybe it's time for you to be a vice president. I said,
Oh.
Great, sounds good to me. And he said, but you know, you can't be a vice president and only have one area of the business reporting to you, so I'm also going to put you in charge of facilities and administration. So here I was, journalism and communications and reporting and all that, and I'm in charge of purchasing and managing all these facilities for this $250 million business unit. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I found really good people who worked for me, and most of them already there, and I learned it while I was doing it. So what I'd say is think, be ready to look at something that's unexpected for you, and be ready to move sideways in order to move up. That's really important. And the other thing is, don't make it all about your job. It's really important that you do something that has absolutely nothing to do with what you do when you go to work every day. You know, if you have kids, when you get home, if your kids are small, it's all about them for a while. I have a kid, but you know, last year a bunch of my friends and I trained to walk the marathon, and so that was a big thing that we did. We said, okay, we're going to get out there and we're going to spend a lot of time on that, and we're still walking, but we make sure that we do things that we didn't talk about work, and we are entirely focused on something that is not work related. You really need to do that to regenerate for what you do when you go to work every day.
Good wisdom. Thanks. Scott?
Well, I totally agree with what you say, and I think, you know, with the political connections, with, you know, you can join either your own political party or just some cause that you believe in. That's a great way to meet people. It's a shared passion, so you instantly have something that connects you to. I mean, it sounds like you can even start dating, but I mean, it's something you really want to do, and you meet people who have similar interests, and because you come from different backgrounds, you'll meet people from, you know, maybe a part of industry that you're interested in, or a part of the government you're interested in, or whatever. But there's so many things to your point. I mean, it's just you can't focus on just the job. I mentioned passion before. You can't be just focused on the one thing, because it's so rare that you get that right out of the gate. You know, like I said, I started at Fleishman Hiller, didn't really like agency work. I went to global events group, didn't really like events company work. But those two jobs in about a 4-year span gave me the tools to be the candidate for the job I wanted at Nike. So I was passionate about doing the work I had to do when I was doing it, because it would be like drudgery to get up every morning and go, gotta go to do the stupid newsletter, you know, or gotta go do Top Fuel drag racing. So you try to find at least a little bit of fun in it. And I networked. I'm like, I got to be in Pomona anyway, so I might as well start to get to know the Texaco PR guy and the Shell PR guy and the Valvoline PR guy and the Lexus PR girl, and just start working my network there. And that's what ultimately got me the job in Portland. I could have just sat there and went, oh, God, you know, did my work and gone to my hotel room and, you know, gotten up the next morning and did it again. But I realized that was what I had to do at the time. So, again, if not everybody has that passion for that one thing that they know they want to do from the age of 6, right? So if you do have that, you know, God bless you, because that's great. My brother has it, and he's pursued his goal for his entire life, and he knows exactly what he wants to do. None of the rest of my brothers and I did, so he's a step ahead of us in doing exactly what he wants to do. But you can still find those pieces and put those pieces together, or even eliminate some things. You know, try something for a little bit and go, whoa, politics is not for me. You know, but I've made a few friends there, but I can't get involved too many hours, too much intensity. You know, so you can write things off that you want to do too, or thoughts that you want to do. I mean, you guys are at a great age where you can experiment a little bit, and you know, try something for a year and a half, and if it's not really what you think it's going to be, you can take a turn, or you can make a lateral move, or even a backward move, and then shift off in a different direction. I mentioned the game chess before. It's not really checkers, because checkers you have to keep moving forward. With chess, you can move back in some pieces, and you can just sort of lay out your life, and you can adjust depending on what life throws back at you. So, I don't know, that's my existential whatever bullshit.
That's good. And Carmen, for you?
I would say they pretty much have covered it, but just to echo, just take opportunity when they present themselves, and take the time to learn something new. I remember when I worked at the county for one particular elected official, I had to cover some budget work sessions, and I hated it. It was not interesting to me. It was not exactly what I was hired to do, which was more external community relations kind of things and communication. But my boss was pretty wise in saying, you need to learn this because one day you'll be glad that you learned the budget process at the county. And that was really important because now I'm very, very happy that I did. And I kept that with me at the city. Now I know the budget process really well. And I can tell you one thing, it's been really, really helpful as a nonprofit director to know how the budget works in the city and the county. So if it stretches you a little bit, but you just have this inkling or intuition that it might help you down the road, take advantage of it because people pay for that kind of training. And here you are having the opportunity to learn it firsthand in something that you're already doing. The other thing I would say is try and find some, I think it's good to have some sort of elements of passion or fun in your job. And when you're not having that when you go to work, or there aren't times when you're feeling that fulfillment, ask yourself if there's something else that maybe you want to be doing, or like Sandy said, like if there's ask yourself if it's time to learn. You've learned everything you can in this job, and it's time to do something else. Don't be afraid of that. I've seen so many of my friends who have been telling me how much they don't like their job, and it's been probably like 4 or 5 years now, and they're still there. And so don't be afraid of changing it up and taking a risk because it really has paid off for me personally. Even the times when it hasn't gone that great in the beginning, there's a lesson in all of it. So that's the only thing I have to add.
Good. That's a lot of good things. Well, here's some nuggets that I take away from some of the things you said. Find some passion or fun. Maybe move sideways before you move up. Have a long-term view. Take opportunities as they present themselves. Be open. And network and maintain those relationships. Lots of good advice from all of you. Now it's your turn. Stephanie is going to have a roving mic, and you can either direct it to one particular person or to the group as a whole. So just be clear on that. Okay? Any hands? Questions? Front row?
We could probably hear about that.
Yeah.
I know, but we're taping it for other people.
Oh, okay.
So we have to have the long-term view with this event.
Okay.
This is for the whole group. When you first started out, how did you make yourselves indispensable?
Nobody else wanted my job. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, when I first started out, I mean, it was, as I mentioned, you were talking about my Nike job or when I first started from Oregon?
Sure, Nike.
Because when I was a PR agency, you're an account executive, is a dime a dozen, right? There, you have to fight with all the other ones for supremacy to move up the ladder. But at Nike, I mentioned earlier, you're really in the fast lane with some really talented people from all over the world, not just the city or the state. So you have to pretty much almost from the get-go show that you belong. And that can be challenging for a lot of people because you have to get to know new nomenclature, a whole new system. We call it the Matrix. Before the movie came out, we had that first. But it's very similar. I mean, in terms of nobody can figure out where it came from or what it means. But it's very challenging because you have a lot of people who are coming many different directions. So I guess I'm losing my train of thought because I'm thinking about the Matrix now. I still can't figure out that movie.
But we digress.
Yes, we digress. So to make yourself indispensable, or to show that you belong, you just have to show results. You have to show you grasp the system, that you understand and I know it sounds like a marketing term, but you have to over-deliver. You have to show them that you're not just giving what they expect out of you, but you're putting a little bit more thought into it. You're showing that you're invested in, and you know that what you're doing is important. It's not just, here's what you asked me to do, I did it, what's next? It's more like, here's what you asked me to do, I thought about it, I've done what you asked, but I've also, because I know Nike so well, I've also done a little bit more, or I've done something maybe you didn't think about. And if you can keep doing that, that's when people start to notice who you are. And so when a position opens up, they're like, that person really delivers more than just what hits on his or her resume. They're really thinking about this company. And anybody, just like as a person, if people think highly of you, you feel good about that, right? So the company if the rest of the people in the company think this guy really embraces what we believe in, you want to naturally say, let's give him more responsibility. Let's let's let him try this job that maybe we don't think he's 100% qualified for, but we know he's going to work his ass off. So let's give it to him. And that's, I think, where a lot of the success comes within the company. And that's what I tried to do, is just say, look, I could give you what you want, but I think there's something else we could do here. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you go off the edge. But if you show that you're trying, I think that differentiates you.
I'm going to answer it maybe not as a worker, but as a boss, okay? Because I've had a lot of people working for me over the years, some really talented people, and I'm first going to say nobody's indispensable, okay? So when I look at who is valuable to me, I agree, it's who works hard, who's creative, who moves the product that they're working on, regardless of what it is, a little bit further than I expected them to. But I also look at who is working within the team, who's building good relationships on the team, and is understanding that what we're trying to do is to have the enterprise be successful as well as the individual, and to deliver to, on our mission, which is a community mission now, but in a way that's valuable, and how do they contribute to that mission. And I can tell you with my current job, which I love and I'm not going anywhere, but I think about how do I leave something that if I were suddenly not to be there tomorrow, am I leaving an enterprise that is successful, that is understandable, that somebody could step into and run probably differently than I have? You really get to a point where you understand you have to take who you are away from it, because somebody else is going to do it or could do it, and they would do it differently than you, and that doesn't make it wrong. So really think about being a contributor to the enterprise and who you work with every day, who you work for, whether it's the business or the organization or the people that you're serving as customers, as community members, and how do you move the mission forward is what I look for.
For me, I think that my personal experience, I've been an assistant to a lot of people as I went along in my career. And I think what personally made me successful was that you become a detail person really quickly and being dependable. It was really important to maintain your professional reputation as you're starting out, and that means following through. And it's okay to say no if you can't do something or if you don't have enough time. That was a big lesson I learned when I was younger. Say no, and you don't have enough time, but you can problem solve about how to get something done. There's nothing worse, I think, than to let something go and never tell the person that's expecting something to be done, because it sets off a series of events that may not have a good outcome for the project or for you. And so follow through and dependability are really good reputation, is a really good reputation to have, and that follows you along, especially if you're in a sort of niche industry. This community is small comparatively to other cities, and so professional reputations become known sometimes, and you don't want to get one early on that you're not dependable, or that you don't follow through, or that you're not creative, or that you don't problem solve. Mm-hmm. So I don't mean to sound so harsh about it, but I've also seen people who had an experience when they were younger, and it was hard to get away from that, even though they've moved away from that as they've progressed. So that's what I would say.
Right. Other questions? Yeah. Right.
My question is for everyone, and it would be, what is your advice on how to move between different fields, and maybe if they're seemingly unrelated, how to make that transition?
You're probably, as you move, you'll find a relationship if you go. I don't know how broad you're thinking, but moving from, I went from a very corporate world to a nonprofit. And you're going to find a niche from one to the next that there is a connection. I learned very early in my career that if you can put a thought together, if you can write, that's a real valuable commodity. And a lot of people can't do it very well. And so I took that from journalism to the electric utility industry, corporate world, and was very, was pretty successful taking that particular skill and then growing that and learning about that industry and networking in that industry and building relationships and growing kind of a bigger niche. And so don't be afraid to explore and really go and call people up and tell them you want to come and sit down and talk to them about it. People are willing to do that. People will, they want to open their doors because, you guys are pretty early in your career compared to me, but we've all been there. And so most people know what that's like to want to make those transitions. And so they're willing to give you advice and open doors and send you in directions and just be willing to take that advice.
Yeah, I think moving from field to field, it also depends on how far a field you move. I mean, you can move from marketing to PR probably a little more easily than you can some of the other disciplines, but again, it's having that longer term vision. You may not know exactly what you want to do when you're 40 or 30 or you may have a general idea. So you need to find opportunities that can help you move towards that, even if it's not a direct line. And sometimes, I think you're right about it. You get to know people. You say, look, I've been involved with, like I'll just use Nike as an example. I've been in running marketing now for a number of years, but I really like advertising. I don't really like doing the races. I'd like to get more about advertising. Well, if you go to the advertising department and just say, I want to learn more about it, they're going to basically say, great, I have no time for this, so I really can't help you. But if you get to know them slowly and just start to get to know their world a little bit more and come maybe with an idea saying, I'm in the running marketing department, but I've had this idea for advertising I think you might be interested in, and you just start working your way gradually. And again, I think it really depends. I've worked for a nonprofit, a tiny 12-person company, a mid-sized PR agency, and now a Fortune 500 company. And within a Fortune 500 company, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of movement, a lot of people move around, so you have a little more freedom to explore. And nonprofits is the same way; it's all hands on deck. I mean, you can write, great, here, do this, So, but it's the mid-level companies where I think you have a little bit less freedom. So I know I'm harping on the same point, but I really do think it's a matter of being able to do the network and to show. You got to show people that you've got a couple of skills maybe that would lend you towards moving in that direction, because I'm sure we've all done the informational interviews where you get somebody who says, oh, I just really want to work at Nike. Well, what do you like to do? Oh, I don't know, marketing, and I'm really good at, and you're thinking, okay, how long do I have to give this before I can get out of here? Because it's the person really doesn't know what they want. They just want to work at Nike. Well, that doesn't really help anybody within the company, because I can't really point them in the right direction because I don't know what their skill set is, other than a passion to work for the company, which is great. But I don't want to waste my colleagues' time by saying, here's somebody who's really interested, she says, in advertising, but she also kind of likes running and tennis and bowling and marketing, and I don't want to waste their time. So I'm not really answering your question necessarily. It's a tough thing. I mean, I don't envy you guys to start out in the business world today. It wasn't easy for us either. But I mean, it's even, I think, harder now in some ways, because I mean, HR at Nike, it's really, really hard to get a job right out of the university at Nike, unless it's a retail job or something more entry level. And I don't think that was true like 20 years ago. I think you could network a little bit more and find a job. I think now it's just a much more challenging work environment. Sorry to be the one to tell you that, but you probably already knew. I don't know. Am I blathering? You guys?
No, very similarly. I would say, I'll tell you how I got my first campaign job. It was because I was volunteering. I worked for a PR agency, and because of the job, we were doing a lot of, and this will probably date me, but it was the opening of the West Side Light Rail project. And it was one of the celebrations along Highway 26, I think, at the zoo. And
I was there.
Were you there? And so it was also during campaign time. So you saw all of the candidates for elected office at this opening celebration. And so I was actually staffing this it was a really beautiful event.
It was lovely.
And so I ran into one of the candidates. She was one of the first. Actually, she was the only Latina that I knew that was running for elected office in Multnomah County. So I was very drawn to her because she represented, a role model to me, even though I didn't know her. And I just said, hey, I really want to help you out on your campaign. And she took down my information, and her campaign manager called me. And so I volunteered for about 6 months through the primary. And when she ran the primary, the campaign manager went to grad school, and she offered me a job, and I took it right then. So she had a chance to see me work through my volunteer experience, which had nothing to do with, PR, but it opened a door for me. And in my current job now, spent a very long time in local politics. And the reason I ended up where I am now is because I was on the board for a good year. And when the position became open, my board members strongly suggested that I take the position. It's because they had a chance to work with me over that time and see what I was like to work with, for one. And two, I think they liked the ideas that I brought to the table. So anytime that you have a chance to let people know you and see how you work and what you can do and what you have to contribute, that's what people will remember. And when I've worked also in elected offices, we've had a lot of interns or volunteers from time to time. And when positions come open, we've already seen how someone has worked out or how someone hasn't worked out, and they've applied for jobs. And a number of times I've seen people get hired into the field that have no background in politics, but because they volunteered on something or they were committed to a project or served on a board or a commission, people had the chance to know them a little bit differently. So that's what I would say.
Great advice. We have time for one more question. Is there one more question? Okay, one more question. Emily. And then we'll have the drawing.
So this speaks to Scott's last comment just a little bit. In terms of variety, our options for the job market are huge, as are a lot of our interests. And I wanted to know from the three of you how you went about really choosing your focus in terms of your passion and what line of work you wanted to go into. It sort of seems like a big daunting question right now, but eventually you do have to choose a path. So I was a little curious.
Yesterday I spoke to the Rose Festival princesses, and it was really kind of interesting. Same subject almost, but a different, obviously a very different kind of a group. And they all felt pressured. They're seniors in high school, and they all felt pressured from their parents saying, you have to pick what you're going to do. You have to decide, get on a path. And I have a senior in high school at home, and I know I've put that kind of pressure on him. Just have a plan is what I say. The truth is, you pick a path, but your path is going to keep forking. And so the trick to being successful in a career over the long term is to be willing to take the forks off the path. If you go on one thing, it's very rare, as Scott said. I wanted to be a reporter from the time I was 11 years old, and I hit the jackpot. The day after I graduated from college, I started at the Oregonian, and it was great. It was lucky. But I did it for 10 years, and I was done with it. So then I took a fork, and I took another fork, and I was very lucky. I got hired into large companies that I had lots of different opportunities, and they would move me around for different experiences. So pick a passion and then that you want to start out on, and then be willing to do something different along the line. And to try things out, be willing to take a risk and maybe fail from time to time. I think all of us would probably say that we've had our moments of failure in our careers, and then pick yourself up and move on. So nothing is set in stone. If you make a decision that's not the right one, you can change it. And the job market has changed a lot, and I agree with Scott. I think it's harder in some ways because you guys have a lot of competition, really a lot of competition out there. And so it's a question of how do you differentiate yourself. And I read a lot of resumes. I have hired a lot of people in my time. And I look for people who've had a well-rounded kind of experience, for every job, whether it's a senior level job or an entry level job. Where you went to college doesn't really matter. Okay, I like ducks. But where you went to college doesn't matter. What you majored in probably doesn't matter. German and journalism, and I'm running a small business basically. But what you've done in your life matters to me. What kind of jobs have you had part-time? Have you volunteered? Are you a well-rounded person? And are you willing to take different paths as you go along and maybe do something a little unexpected.
I mentioned earlier about I sort of backed into what I was doing. You know, I quit Oregon after going to UMass that year. I started working at the Y. You know, I just all of a sudden had an affinity, or I just really enjoyed writing, and that was an epiphany for me. So I did that to the point where I felt like I could go as far as I could go. Then I was the PR director for the YMCA, and I knew I enjoyed it. Again, it doesn't pay well, and I just got married. I felt like I really need to do something else with it. So for me, my way was much more clear than I think a lot of students, college students are, because I was 26, I think at the time, 27, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I just had to get that damn degree out of the way. So I went back into Oregon, and I just was like bam, 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 bam. You know, 22, 23 hours a trimester. I made like no friends because I was, you know, basically there. Hi, what's the assignment? Done. Out of here. You know, and then repeat. So by the time I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do because I'd had plenty of years of, as you mentioned, failing and messing up and going down the wrong path, and so that was really clear to me. And not everybody has that clarity when they graduate. So I was lucky in that way. At the time, I wasn't realizing it, but. So I don't know that I can really impart a lesson on you. I mean, don't just mess up throughout most of your 20s like I did. Although there were some really good years, as Terry can attest to, but he won't. So I don't know. As you were talking, and we were talking earlier about how hard it is to get jobs. In some ways, that's true. But also, I was thinking about LinkedIn and all the different ways that there are to be connected. You know, the University of Oregon's website and the Alumni Association, things that really, even if they existed back in the 80s, they were much more. You know, the Alumni Association existed, but there wasn't that networking like there's going on now. So, you know, there are ways that you can get ahead of the game that maybe we didn't have. It's a double edge. I don't know. I just feel like I'm blathering by the time I shut up.
You're doing good. You're doing good. Basically, what these two have just said about taking the risk of going down the fork in the road is really important. Don't get frustrated if you're not where you want to be in a year. It's taken a long time sometimes to get where I want to go, and sometimes by the time I get what I want, I realize I like this other thing, and I'm going to continue down this path. So you're going to change. You're probably going to be at a different place in 5 years than you are right now, and you might find some rich lessons in that time, and you might want completely something different at that time as well. So just be open to things, I would say, and know that your path isn't going to go in a straight line. It's going to go in a curvy one, and you're all the better for it.
Definitely take advantage of your youth. I mean, you have the time to rebuild. If something goes the wrong way for a year or two, you're not committed to a 30-year mortgage and 4 kids, and I like 2. But I mean, I have much more on the line now than I did when I was in my 20s. So you have the luxury, most of you do at least, to try something out and just go, oof, boy, I thought that was going to like that, and that turned out to be terrible. But you're just a year older and have plenty ahead of you.
And yet, I want to. Carmen mentioned that she was on the board of the Latino Network when she was recruited for that job. I was on the board of the Portland Business Alliance as a volunteer when I was recruited for this job. And the truth is, my other job ended. I was with the national energy company that got caught in the energy crunch. I had a great job. I was vice president of a national business. I was overseeing operations in 20 states, loving every minute of it. We had a national bankruptcy, and then we took this business that I'd helped put together, we took it apart. I got to tell you, the day they called and told me that the Portland-based business was being sold and that my position was the one out here, because I wasn't really Portland-based anymore, but I lived here, I wasn't going with the sale, so my job was gone. I was thrilled. You know, I knew that there would be a severance, but I also was ready to do something different, and honestly, I wanted to take a summer off, but that didn't happen because this other opportunity came up. But I'd been volunteering, and like she said, they knew who I was, and I had this incredible opportunity as a volunteer at the Alliance, my company. It was my old job. It was one of the things we did was to be involved in the community, but I was networking with the top business leaders in this city every single day, and so it was easy to roll to the next thing, which happened to be running this organization. So you just don't know. You've got to be willing to go out there and do different things and keep your eyes open.
Great advice. Okay, anyone who has not put a card or a piece of paper in here, please do so now. I do want to make one comment in response to the economy. A big reason why we have this program here is that what we have found is that if people are prepared for the job market, they have much greater success in landing that job if you utilize all the tools that are at your resource. So you can't necessarily find a job by going online and hoping that one pops up. You have to put the work in order to make that change or to find that first job. So do continue to utilize us if you find yourself in that boat, because we're seeing great success with people that are prepared. So with that, again, all of our wonderful panelists have agreed to do an informational interview and take you to lunch or coffee, whatever works out for them. I'll start with we have one speaker that has been very ill for over a week and was not able to join us, from Willamette Valley Vineyards. So I will start with him because he said once he's well, he's still willing to go to lunch, but you'll probably wait for him to get well. So I have selected Che Pak from Row House. Did I say your name right? Are you here? Oh, poor Che. I guess somebody
must be present to win.
Yeah, must be present to win, of course. Got to reward the people. Travis Lucky, VTM group. And he's lucky. Perfect. How about that? So we'll follow up, and you can talk to him
Should we
later.
draw our own? Sweet.
You want to draw your own?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that way,
A little freshness here? Okay, we'll pass it. So this is for Scott.
Daniel Thompson.
So
you can follow up with him afterwards?
Daniel, make him invite you out to the Nike campus. If you haven't done it, it's very cool. Okay. Emily? Huddy? Oh, great. Perfect. Okay.
Great.
Lisa Anderson.
Lisa Anderson. Great. Yay. Okay, congratulations, everybody. But they're not going anywhere. And again, I think you guys all heard that making those connections, networking, and building those relationships are important. So I encourage you to stay. We have plenty of food out here, and please do connect. Thanks for coming, everyone.